Hi, and welcome to Hitting Home with Mike Montague, Arif Khan. How are we doing today?
In stereo.
In stereo, yes.
Yeah,
How are we
not quite
today,
harmony.
Arif?
I am fantastic. Happy spring.
Happy spring. It is spring. We just had the long weekend, had family all around, stuffed our faces. It was a good time. How about you? What did you do for Easter?
Well, I refrain from stuffing my face.
You do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But I do indulge. Actually, we do a round to family, as you mentioned, family. We're at in-laws, and then we're at my parents' house, and I don't know, something about it. I'm almost 47, and I still can't wait to go and sit at dinner with my family, with my parents, and have home cooking.
Food is a great anchor for bringing people together.
It's a discussion point, and yeah, you're right. It brings people together.
Do you have a favorite meal that you eat during the holidays? The
So
spring, Easter holidays?
We don't ascribe to a specific religion necessarily. That our family's large enough. There are people of different faiths, etc. But it was, we recognize Good Friday just because it's something we can do as more of a local tradition and national tradition amongst our family, recognizing this time of year around the world.
Getting everybody together.
So we refrain from meat, but my mother cooked salmon, and it is the best salmon that I have ever tasted, better than mine. And that's one of my only dishes that I do cook, and vegetables, etc. It was really good, but it was also festive. It was we had chocolate, and we just had good conversation.
Excellent.
Multiple generations that were there.
Yeah, that's great. Nice. And it's, families, homes were filled with families getting together in spring.
Well, that's just it. You can sense it in the air that people are excited
to get together. Saw some robins there last week.
Robins?
Yeah, they're out there.
I did not see robins.
They're working their way back, and spring real estate market. And I get that question, and your producer says, why is spring the time everybody wants to sell? And there's a number
do you think it's coincidence, though?
I don't know that it is. I think there's a lot of legitimate things you can point to. First of all, your home never looks better than it does in the spring, certainly by contrast to how it looks through the winter when you're buried under all the snow. So that's one factor, is it gets a little bit warmer. People now have the climate to go out and fix those eaves troughs.
Aside from April Fools, where Mother Nature decided to snow on us on April 1st.
Yeah, you're still hit and miss here in Barrie, Ontario, and in this region for whether or not. I mean, I have Easter memories of nice warm wearing T-shirts, or other memories wearing coats. So it's that time of year.
But I think it's an emotional moment. It's emotional, it's psychological. You're right. I mean, why are people listing? I think we can certainly talk about that. Easter's represents a whole bunch of things: new life, new beginnings, buds on the trees, flowers in bloom. I know my father-in-law has already got his 100 or so little flower pots with seeds that have already started to sprout. And
well, I mean, a new year's a new chapter, but somehow I think getting into it's still January's a carryover from December weather-wise, and that the new chapter really feels like it's beginning when the weather starts to turn. Those days are getting longer, and and that's the other thing. You've got more daylight to do things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other factor on why people tend to list in the spring is a lot of homeowners have kids. So do you really want to pull your kids out before the end of the year to move into a new house?
Let's hold on that just for a moment, because what I want to do is you had a great idea. You want to talk about some stats. So let's talk about some stats just for a minute, and then let's go into the whys behind it and maybe some recommendations for people if they're thinking about listing. So
excellent.
Let's take this moment just for a segment and talk about stats.
Okay.
Bring us up to speed.
Well, bring us up to speed, and I don't have them all put to memory, but we are looking at the March statistics that are out. And just to preface this, the statistics that we have typically come out towards the end of the next month.
Where do you get these statistics from?
Well, the Canadian Real Estate Association does compile the statistics, the data from the number of sales, the changes in trends, prices upwards, downward, and they crunch these numbers and they determine averages and means, and compare year over year, month over month. And it's a great way to gauge where we're at right now, and if there's a trend, you can see where we're likely to be going in the next month or two. And it helps to establish your home price. When you go to list, if you notice prices have been steadily dropping or steadily increasing, you're going to factor that into the number that you try to arrive at to list your home, because you want to do it at market value.
So ultimately, as much as you want to get the most for your sale of your home, you also want to make sure that you eventually do sell your home. And there are some pitfalls that we'll talk about shortly about, how do you know what to price at?
Pricing your home.
And do you go in a little high, hoping that you'll negotiate down? Or
Well,
we'll talk about that after.
It is a science to a degree.
Yeah. So
and
Joe, our
it's
producer, is going to put
psychology
this up
to a
on the
degree
screen for us, right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Well, we'll look at the numbers. Like the average sold price for the month of March was $495,000. That's taking into account Barrie and region, Simcoe County, where the Barrie Real Estate Board does do its business and draw its data from.
And does it matter if it's a detached or a town or
Well,
a
that's
condo?
where I was going.
Okay.
Is that's all properties sold. So if you look here, sales by volume, property type, about 2/3 of those were detached homes. About another quarter of that was townhouses, and then a remaining maybe 10% is condo sales. So
Okay.
it's all of those. I mean, you know, you look at that 495. There's different ways you can pull that. If it's just detached homes, it's going to be a different number. If it's by geographical region, obviously those numbers are going to change. But 495 gets a general round number. And
so from February, that was what?
well, the number in and of itself doesn't mean anything unless you look that. So if the monthly change over February, it's up 3.9%.
Okay.
The quarterly change, so if you look at what 495 was in relation to home prices averages in December, so in that first quarter, we're up 9.2%. But what's interesting,
and this is home price. This has nothing to do with volume of sales, right?
No.
So it would be wrong for me to say, in December people don't want to sell because it's Christmas time and et cetera.
But yet, home prices have still been going up. You're not going to lose money selling your home. The days on market might be longer when there's less activity. But there's a number of things to factor in.
Is it indicative of competition then?
Oftentimes, the more in demand your home is, the more, the fewer homes you're in competition with, the quicker you're likely to sell, and the more chance of selling. Okay. And for closer to list priced. And for the month of March, the stat was homes on average sold for 98% of list. That's significant.
That's something we're going to talk about going forward into the next segment. We're just about a minute away. I hold that thought, or not hold that thought, remember to bring that up in the next segment. The big thing I want to get out, the elephant in the room, the conversation, whether you're reading it on the headlines of the newspaper, or whether you're speaking with people around the kitchen table, that kind of thing, is the difference in the selling prices of today versus this time last year. Touch on that for a second. You got 30 seconds.
That's the stat I want to wrap up with, the year-over-year change. We looked at we're up 3.9 from last month, up 9.2% from December, but we're down 16.9% from this time last year.
Okay, so can I play devil's advocate or not conspiracy theorist, but I want to put some of this stuff to rest. If you actually can tell me about the trends over the last 5 years, and we saw consistent, reasonable, incremental price growth, maybe even beyond reasonable, but
healthy.
It was pretty steady. Call it around
3 to 5, 6, 7% average annual increases year over year.
All right. So
up until about 2 years ago.
Up until 2 years ago. Then we saw 35% increase or whatever.
We saw chaos. Yeah, we saw a lot of things. I'm not sure exactly what the tipping point was. I don't think you can pin it to any one thing. It was a combination of things that created that storm.
We're going to wrap up. Yes or no? Is it reasonable to say that we saw a 16.9% drop, or was that because it's a correction on something that was unsustainable?
Correction on the 16.9% increase we likely saw in the year or 2 years previous to that.
So if we take this into account, we're back on a normal trajectory?
Yeah, the pendulum swung back is all that happened there.
Good. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the spring market. We're going to talk about how best to position yourself for a healthy and successful sale.
Okay. Excellent.
All right, we'll see you shortly. And welcome back to Hitting Home with RF and Mike, or Mike and RF. We were just before the break talking about the spring market and talking about recent stats. And we wanted to sort of segue into, this great time of year that people are feeling energetic, renewed sense of urgency or excitement in their life to maybe move or to take on a new chapter in their life, et cetera.
Yep.
And we were talking about some stats. We were talking about, though, the last stat you really touched on, which I thought was really important, which was 98% of homes are selling at list price.
Yeah.
Now, of course,
On average, yeah.
on
it's
average,
the-
that
the
doesn't
prices.
mean
Every home is at
that.
98%.
Yeah, that doesn't mean, or does that mean go ahead and jack your price of your house up by an extra couple $100,000 and hope that you're going to get 98% of that?
No, because you can easily price yourself out of the market, and if your home's sitting there and people are likely not choosing to look at it, they're compiling their list of homes to see. If your price is way out of whack with other comparable homes, they're going to leave it off the list.
So let me rephrase that in English then. Of the homes that sold, they typically sold at 98% of asking price. So if your house isn't selling, you may have to look at that as one
Adjusting
of your
your price.
adjusting your
One of the things.
Okay.
You look at a number of things, but I mean, if it's being exposed properly, if you've set your home up in a saleable condition, it's
Right.
clean, and you're taking care of things, and it presents well, and it's still not happening, or you may even be getting the traffic, but you're not getting the offers, then you do have to take a look at price. It's a hard
I was
discussion
telling
to
you.
broach as a realtor, where you got to come in and say, it's time for us to talk about price.
Yeah, and Mike, I mean, in fairness and full disclosure, I mean, I don't mind sharing our experiences. You know, we sold in the last few months and bought as well. And that was a conversation that our realtor had to have with me, particularly, more so than with my wife and more so than with the family in general. It was like, I was absolutely adamant and determined that my house was worth more. I mean, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to come into that low, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is, the market determined what the house was worth.
It does. And markets can shift. So maybe when you prepared that first valuation and between you and your realtor and went, yeah, let's try it here, we might have been in the midst of a shift, and a week later that number was out of line. And that's the kind of year we've had in the last year.
We just talked about the year over year, and we just talked about coming down 16.9%.
We can see that it's changed from month to month.
And in fairness, I thought I had come down enough to take that into account,
Yeah.
and clearly I hadn't. I hadn't.
We
still
have
sold
a certain
for a record
bias
number,
over
but
our homes. We
sure
really
we
do. We have our pride, and the work we do on our homes, we overestimate the added value oftentimes. If we do a rec room, if we do put a deck on the back, there's formulas to just specifically how much value that does add. For a deck, it might be $5,000, even though it cost you $10,000 to build. It's not $10,000, but it adds $20,000 value. You put a pool in a yard, for example, it actually makes your home more difficult to sell, because now you've limited the scope of people to people who want pools. So.
And that's so true. I mean, if you think you spent $10,000 on a new roof, your home should be worth $10,000 more. I think it's a common misconception. The fact of the matter is that your home is expected to have a roof on it, and your home's roof is expected to be in good repair.
Exactly.
So you're not going to necessarily see an increase in value if the roof was in a poor state of repair.
You might
likely see a decrease in the value.
Someone's going to come back and say, I'm going to have to replace that roof in 3 years.
And it's going to cost me $10,000.
Yeah,
so I'm not going to give you $5,000, but I'm going to take away $10,000.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we experienced, though, when moving was, you talked about overestimating. I'm going to say underestimating. We actually underestimated. You think that I'm in the business that I would have known this. Unless it's actually happening to you, I'm going to say that you're not necessarily giving it the full credit it deserves. And we underestimated the amount of time it took for us to prepare our home for sale. Now, we found a home that we knew we wanted to have, and we went and bought it, and then we're like, oh, darn, now we need to go and sell our home.
Yeah.
So we're not flawless in our own way in terms of preparation. This is something that's important, that as we're entering into the spring market, which is traditionally a market that sees higher volume and more sales activity, how much time it does take to prepare your home for sale. So maybe touch on that.
Well, I think what happens is a lot of times you're coming in and out of your house. There's little things, that scratch there, that cracked tile over there, you're just not seeing. You're in your routine,
You're used to
and
it.
you don't have that objective lens on until you get ready to sell, and it's difficult to put yourself into that mindset to look critically at your home, or it's just no more or less than at your own children or your own family. It's and suddenly you go, okay, if I went into someone else's home, I would have saw that broken tile, or I would have saw that piece of the countertop that's missing, whatever. So suddenly you're looking through this new lens at your house, and you're realizing, okay, there's a lot of work here that I really wasn't really hadn't
Unless,
thought
of
it
course,
through
you're
this
like me
far.
and you're OCD and you all of a sudden go around, and by the time you go and sell that used car or you go and put your house for sale, you're like, I have polished it and waxed it and prepped it and detailed it so much, I'm not so sure I want to sell it anymore. It's a
Well,
nice looking
there's that.
house or a nice
Yeah,
looking car.
yeah.
So there's two sides of that, and you have
There
to
is.
maintain a
But
reasonable...
but you want to present your home as best as you possibly can present it. I mean, it's self-defeating to think, well, there's a lot of demand for a home, so I don't need to clean the carpets. I don't need to fix that broken downspout or anything. You're changing the impression that you're going to be giving to people. Like people, you want to bring them in, you want them to think, this is where I want to be, this is where I want to live.
So
Not, this is the project I want to take on.
So we've got a couple of things. We've got a little bit of time. Let's just about 3 minutes before we go to break. But let's talk about this because we've had a home stager on the show. We've had a contractor on the show. But at the same time, some people will go to town. We have a house that was listed just a couple doors down from us, and that person went and put a whole ton of money into the house and isn't getting it back.
No. Did they sell?
No, they haven't
No?
sold,
Okay.
and the price keeps on coming down. So one of the things is that you also have to remember, just because you do a renovation doesn't mean that that renovation will be appealing to the person who buys it.
Well, it's not that it is or isn't appealing. The
mean,
price still has to reflect
and the
it.
pri-
you know?
and the
You
price still
can't
has to reflect
overprice.
it.
Doesn't matter how nice the home is. There's a market price, and then there's an overprice. And people aren't going to deliberately overpay for homes
So let's say
if they don't have to.
Let's say you haven't convinced yourself to do some massive renovation. You didn't buy the house to flip it. You've been living there 10 years, and you're not going to go do a massive renovation just in time to sell it for money that you're not necessarily going to get back out. So are we looking at just declutter, maybe do some paint? Because everybody says paint is your biggest bang for your buck. Paint bathrooms, kitchens, that
Paint
kind of
is. Paint is probably, the most significant transition you can give a home for the least amount of money.
thing. So it's a refresh.
It is. It's a refresh. I mean, your square footage decreases by a very small amount by every time you paint, but versus doing new floors or new ceilings or anything, those are significant projects. And a lot of times too, the reno projects, you talk about how it always seems to take longer and cost more than you anticipated. And you've seen the TV shows, Home Channel. That little reno you're going to do exposes something else, which turns into another project, which leads to another thing that needs to be done. So if you keep it to the simple things like paint, clean, just make your home clean, declutter, and you hear it over and over again. The cost of renting a storage facility, or if you know someone with a barn or a garage, you can move stuff out. And I've oftentimes told people, get the stager in there. Well, we have furniture. I go, yeah, but your furniture's 25 years old and you got duct tape holding the arm of your chair together. People are as much buying into a lifestyle, a presumption of a lifestyle. If they come in and they think
They don't want to picture you in there. They want to picture themselves in there.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
I've often told people, you've got the mantle. Don't put a whole bunch of pictures of your family and your grandkids. Put the pictures of your trip to Paris or wherever you've gone, where people think that's the lifestyle I'm going to have if I live in this house.
We got to go.
You want to sell that impression.
When we come back from the break, let's answer a few questions that our guests have.
We do
our
have a
audience
few.
has
They're
sent
coming
Yeah.
in, so this is great. And
We'll be right back.
spit that back. Okay.
And we're back to Hitting Home. Mike and RF here. And we've been talking about preparing your house to list for sale, and it's the spring market. We're getting into that time where we're seeing more homes come on the market. Actually, before the show tape, we were talking about sort of different creative ways that listing agents may want to present the house in its best light. And I was personally a little bit critical, which is sometimes what I do. And I remember seeing in January, I saw a listing, and it was a beautiful home. Don't get me wrong, it was the most beautiful home, and it wasn't over embellished, as sometimes they are. But it was funny because it was January, and it was a home that had the most beautiful, lush green gardens and flowers out, and it was
The pictures of
the home.
Yeah, on Realtor.ca, I'm guessing, yeah.
And so I questioned to myself, I said, I wonder what Mike thinks about this, because the question is, yes, is this showing the home in its best light? Absolutely.
What was your first thought?
Well,
And
the
I'll
middle
guess
of
it would be
February is
my
never the best.
First thought is,
best
what are
light.
they trying to hide?
What are they trying to hide? But actually, my first thought was, is that going to make the average person who's looking through listings wonder if this house has been sitting on the market for 6 months?
Possibly. They're going to think.
That was my
you
first
know,
question.
It's been a long time since the grass was green and the leaves were on the trees. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your photos, representations of a house need to be current. And
To be honest, I wasn't thinking, what are they hiding?
you're selling a car.
I was actually thinking,
do you use the pictures of before it was all had the rusted fenders, or do you use the current picture of it? I think you need to accurately represent what it is you're selling, and a house is no different than any other thing that you're going to sell. And to that, if you listed a house 2-3 weeks ago and there was a foot of snow on the lawns, on the roof, and it's still for sale, and now it's spring and the snow was melted, your realtor should be getting some fresh photos in there. And then if it's still listed when the flowers have come out, first of all, have that conversation about whether it's priced properly, because now it sounds like it's been on too long, but update the photos again.
So that's an interesting thought, though.
You want your photos to best reflect the house at that time that it's for sale.
So it's not expensive to print out a new set of listing material that you have sitting on the counter on the island when someone walks through. That's not expensive.
It's
and
the
as
cost
well,
of
we
doing
work
business.
and we work in digital media, so you can always update your MLS photos, I'm assuming.
Oh yes.
Okay.
You just resubmit new photos. And you know, for realtors that doesn't want to do it, I mean, I'm sorry, if homes went up 16% in the last year, the potential income of a realtor for selling that home has gone up 16% too.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to be
yeah.
giving a lot more back to the consumer that we're representing, rather than thinking we can just continue doing the same thing we've always done.
So we're now in the spring market, or at the beginning of the spring market. We're seeing sales listings start to increase. Important to let our viewers know, if they are thinking of selling, it does take a little bit of time to get your house ready. I mean, I'm firsthand example of, we were not ready to sell when we decided
whatever
we were going to buy.
timeline you think you can quickly come up with in your head, you can bet if it's different than that, it doesn't mean it's going to likely be shorter, that you overestimated the time. In all likelihood, you've underestimated
So be
the time.
prepared and have that conversation with your realtor.
For sure, yeah. And I would say on the safe side, at least 30 days ahead of time. I mean, obviously, if something happens and you've got to move right away, you're going to do it and you'll make it work. You'll find a way to make it work. But
So we're not too late to get into the market, but
days.
30 days, 60 days?
Unless you're looking at some serious
might miss the
renovations, then yeah. Right. So, but again, so if you know you want to time your move to list in the spring, so you can move over the summer when the kids are out of school, start thinking in January. Start actually doing some of the things to get your home ready at the beginning of the year. Because it's not a project that's going to start and end over a 30, 60-day period. You need to be prepared before.
Good, very good points. Now, we've got a couple questions from our viewers, and I want to ask you the questions, and I want to get through 3 of them before the end of the show today. So Don's asking us real quick, if a home has had a bit of a history to it, maybe there was some criminal activity, maybe a grow-up, maybe something happened at that home, is the seller responsible for disclosing that information?
Well, the seller legal, and there's been cases where this has been taken to court, and a judge could go either way on that, and they have gone either way. So there's no single precedent. So with regards to that, it's best to disclose. And you know, if you're the realtor and you have an obligation to disclose. You can't withhold. If you have a client, you as a client aren't telling me about something that happened in the home, then obviously I can't know that. As a good realtor, I should do a little bit of homework and find out everything I can, positive and negative, about the home. But I like to talk to my clients who are buyers and put a little bit of the responsibility on them. If you're going to look at a home and you want to know if anything happened in there, if there's a history of negative, whatever it could be, a grow up, a
well, let me ask you this actually. Let me break it down.
Finish that thought though, is go see the next door neighbors and just talk to them. Say, hey, I was just looking at the home. I might be your new neighbor. Tell me a little bit. Neighbors are pretty good at disclosing, but is there anything I should know about or anything that's happened?
Let me scrutinize that though a little bit. A grow-up may have repercussions, like they may have broken in below the foundation, they may have tied into the electrical
there
system.
Could be the integrity
mold.
of the home is challenged by a grow-up.
Now, respectfully, I'm not going to diminish the gravity of a homicide, but would a death in a home actually impact the integrity of the home itself?
It depends on the individuals. You're not obligated to disclose it. If the little old lady who lived there passed away at home under home care, you don't have to disclose that. If there was something more graphic and criminal to it, you may want to disclose it because it's going to come forward anyways. And best you prepare people for that and save them trying to come back at you for that. Is it going to diminish the value of the home? I guess you have to evaluate each scenario individually. How? Just what are we talking about here?
You're being fair, you're revealing full disclosure, and it's up to the buyer if they want to put in a bid at the high price.
Jeffrey Dahmer's house or something, then chances are
fair enough.
It might influence.
I got to move on to the next one. So Teresa just bought a house 2 hours away in Owen Sound that closes in a month. She saw the house twice before making her offer, and again during a home inspection. My offer states that I have the right to revisit the home 2 more times before closing. Is a pre-closing inspection really necessary?
It's not necessary, but it's always good to see for yourself what's happening in the home, because between when you purchased and